Hey guys, tonight we are traveling back in time, not to witness a grand battle or a royal coronation, but to slip quietly into the daily life of medieval nobility and explore the parts that don't make it into the epic poems. Imagine the faint, golden light of dawn filtering through a narrow, unglazed window slit. You hear the distant crow of a rooster, the soft shuffling of servants, and the gentle rustling in your mattress. The air you breathe is thick, a complex bouquet of wood smoke, old sweat, unwashed bodies, and yesterday's wine. For a modern person, the sheer, immersive reality of the smells and sensations would be overwhelming. You probably wouldn't survive the first day without an existential crisis and a desperate craving for hand sanitizer. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And in the comments below, let me know where in the world you're listening from and what time it is for you. I always love to see how far these little journeys reach. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You awaken slowly, your body reluctant to leave the relative warmth of the bed. The warmth, however, is not entirely your own. You shift, and the person sleeping next to you grumbles in their sleep, their leg twitching against yours. In the grand bedchamber of a stone castle, privacy is a concept as foreign as central heating. You are a person of some standing, and so you sleep in a massive four-poster bed draped with thick, heavy curtains of velvet or wool. And this isn't just for show. These curtains are a vital piece of technology, your primary defense against the bone-chilling drafts that perpetually snake through the stone halls, and one of the only ways to create a small, intimate space in a world with very few private rooms. Still, it's a crowded space. Besides your spouse, you might be sharing this bed with one of your children, a visiting cousin, or even a trusted lady-in-waiting or squire, all piled in for communal warmth. It's a cozy, human-powered furnace. The mattress beneath you is a thick sack, a palliasse, stuffed with straw, feathers, or horsehair. It rustles with every movement, not just from the filling, but from the other, much smaller inhabitants who call it home. Fleas are a constant, an accepted part of life. You are so used to them you barely notice their tiny, persistent bites. The first, pressing need of the morning arrives. You carefully swing your legs over the side of the high bed, your feet landing on a floor strewn with rushes and fragrant herbs. It's cold. There is no ensuite bathroom, no quiet porcelain throne down the hall. Underneath your magnificent bed, tucked away for convenience, is a chamber pot. It might be simple pottery, or if you're particularly well off, it's made of pewter with a lid. With your bedmates just inches away, perhaps pretending to be asleep, you relieve yourself. There's a certain unceremonious intimacy to the sounds and the smells that follow. This is not a moment for modesty. A servant will be in shortly to collect the pot, take it to the nearest window or slop chute, and unceremoniously add its contents to the castle moat, or a growing pile in the courtyard below. That's waste management, medieval edition. With that done, it's time for your morning toilet. A young servant enters, bowing, and places a wide, shallow basin on a wooden stand, along with a pitcher of water and a linen towel. The water is cool, not hot, and it's likely been scented. Perhaps today it's rosewater, or water steeped with lavender or chamomile. You dip your fingertips into the basin, daintily, and splash a little of the scented water onto your face. You pat your skin dry with the linen towel, and that's it. That's your morning shower. The purpose here is not hygiene as we understand it. It's about presentation and aroma. Soap is a harsh, caustic substance made from lye and animal fat, used primarily for laundering the underlinens, your delicate noble skin. The goal is to mask the natural accumulated odors of the body with a more pleasant, floral scent. Cleanliness is a symbol of status, but it's a symbolic cleanliness. Next, your teeth. There is no mint-flavored paste on a specially designed brush. Your servant hands you a small square of rough linen. You might dip it in water, or perhaps a mixture of salt and powdered herbs like sage. You wrap the cloth around your finger and rub it vigorously against your teeth and gums. It's abrasive, sure, but it scores away some of the plaque and the lingering taste of sour wine from the night before. It's a purely mechanical cleaning. Now, if you are a noble lady, the most dangerous part of your morning routine begins. You sit before a small mirror, not made of glass, but of highly polished silver or steel, which gives a slightly distorted, murky reflection of your face. True beauty in this era is a deathly pallor. A tanned face suggests you labor in the fields, like a peasant. To achieve the fashionable ghost-white complexion, you take a pot of Venetian ceruse. It's a thick, white paste made by mixing white lead with vinegar. You carefully smooth this opaque mask over your face, your neck, and your décolletage. It hides blemishes, freckles, and any sign of a healthy, sun-kissed life. It also, of course, slowly poisons you, seeping into your pores, causing skin damage, hair loss, and eventual organ failure. A small price to pay for beauty, apparently. Historians still argue whether the pale look was purely a mark of status, showing you didn't work in the sun, or if it was also tied to deep-seated cultural notions of purity and feminine fragility. For a splash of color, a dab of rouge made from crushed insects or plant matter goes on the cheeks, and perhaps a touch of belladonna in the eyes to dilate the pupils, giving you a wide-eyed, slightly dazed look that was considered alluring. Finally, you must get dressed. Servants appear with an armful of clothes. Getting dressed is a team sport. First, a simple washable linen smock or shirt. Your chemise. This is the single most important garment for hygiene, as it's the only layer that is laundered with any regularity. It's your personal barrier against the grime of your own body and the filth of your opulent outer layers. Over this, the real finery is piled on. A woolen tunic, perhaps, then a surcoat of velvet dyed a deep, rich crimson, its sleeves lined with fur. These magnificent, heavy, and incredibly expensive outer garments will almost never be washed. The harsh lye soaps and vigorous scrubbing would destroy the fragile dyes. An intricate embroidery that cost a fortune and took months to create. So, instead of being washed, they are brushed to remove dust and aired out. Any persistent smells are simply overpowered. You might wear a small, ornate metal ball on a chain around your waist, called a pomander. This curious accessory is filled with pungent, sweet-smelling substances like ambergris, musk, cloves, and cinnamon. Whenever you pass a particularly ripe-smelling corner of the castle, or perhaps get a little too close to a fellow unwashed noble, you can simply lift the pomander to your nose for a brief, fragrant escape. Your modern dry cleaning bill for an outfit like this would be astronomical. For you, a good brushing is all it gets. You are now dressed, perfumed, polished, and ready to descend from your chamber to hold court. A magnificent, walking contradiction of exquisite wealth and secreted grime. Lions stepping out from the relative seclusion of your bedchamber. You pull the heavy oak door shut behind you, the iron latch clunking into place. The hallway beyond is a different world. It's long, stone-walled, and illuminated in patchy shafts of dusty light from the high, narrow windows. The air is alive with drafts, cold fingers of wind that seem to find every gap in the stone and every opening in your lavish, layered clothing. You walk across a floor that is sometimes bare, cold stone, and sometimes covered with those same sweet-smelling rushes you have in your chamber. They add a bit of insulation and a pleasant, princeresings, hay-like aroma that serves as a base note for the castle's complex perfume. As you make your way toward the great hall for the midday meal, you become aware of a familiar, subtle sensation. A tiny tickle at your hairline, a faint itch on your arm. Just beneath the velvet of your sleeve, these are your constant, unwelcome companions. Lice and fleas. They are an utterly mundane feature of existence, shared across every social class, from the lowest peasant to the king himself. Having them is not a sign of poor hygiene, it's a sign of being alive in the Middle Ages. You might discreetly scratch your head through an elaborate hairstyle, or, if you're a lady, perhaps a towering headdress. Delousing one another is a common and even social pastime. Ficre and feeple, a practical act of grooming that also serves as a moment of quiet intimacy, much like monkeys grooming each other in a troop. To combat the other tiny terrors, the fleas, You might employ a rather ingenious, if slightly grim, fashion accessory. This is a quirky little tidbit of noble life, the flea fur. It's a small stole or tippet, made from the pelt of a marten, a stoat, or some other small, furry animal. You drape this over your shoulders, or carry it. The idea is simple. The fleas, attracted to the warmth and scent of the fur, will preferentially jump onto the pelt, leaving your own noble skin alone for a little while. The fur becomes a sacrificial lamb, a designated pest paradise. You can then hand it to a servant to be deloused, shaken out over a fire, or simply taken away, offering a temporary reprieve. A truly luxurious flea fur might even have a jeweled head with a golden chain. Foen tantrin tinshin, turning your personal pest trap into a status symbol. You continue your journey, passing massive, beautiful tapestries that hang on the walls. They depict grand hunts or biblical scenes, and they serve a dual purpose. They are magnificent displays of wealth, and like the curtains around your bed, they provide a much-needed layer of insulation against the cold stone. They are also, however, excellent habitats for moths and dust mites, and they trap the smells of the castle within their woven threads: wood smoke, damp stone, cooking odors, and the ever-present hint of human and animal waste. Along the corridor, you pass a small, unassuming doorway tucked into a thick section of the outer wall. From it emanates a particularly potent draft and a sharp, ammoniac smell. This is the garderobe, the castle's lavatory. The name literally translates to warding the robes. Design is simple: a stone or wooden seat with a hole that opens directly down the side of the castle wall into the moat below, or into a dedicated cesspit. There is no flushing, only the ammonia fumes rising from the pit were believed to have the convenient side effect of killing moths and other pests, so nobles would often hang their expensive robes in the small chamber of the garderobe, combining storage and sanitation in a way that seems utterly bizarre to us. It's an early and very fragrant form of pest control. One must simply hope there isn't a strong updraft on a particularly cold day. The sounds grow louder as you approach the great hall. The murmur of voices becomes a dull roar of conversation, fatimanti, punctuated by the clatter of servants setting tables and the barking of dogs. You step through the arched doorway and the full sensory experience hits you. The hall is a cavernous space with a high vaulted timber ceiling, blackened with soot from the huge, open hearth in the center of the room or along one wall. The air is thick with smoke that stings your eyes and a mix of smells: roasting meat, baking bread, spilled wine, and the wet dog scent of the hounds that are currently scavenging for scraps under the tables. I warns, but before you can join the throng and take your place at the high table, a crucial ritual must be observed. A page, a young boy in your household's livery, approaches you. He bows low, holding a silver ewer, a fancy pitcher in one hand, and a matching shallow basin, called a lavabo, in the other. Another servant stands by with a long, clean linen towel draped over his arm. This entire branch of the household, the ewery, is dedicated to providing water for washing. The page kneels and pours a thin stream of cool, rose-scented water over your hands. You hold your hands out over the basin, rubbing your fingers together elegantly, not to scrub, but to perform the act of being cleansed. The water runs off into the basin. You do not touch soap. You barely even get your hands properly wet. It is a pantomime of purification. Once you are done, you flick your fingers to remove the last droplets, and the other servant steps forward for you to dry your hands on the clean towel. All this act is pure theater, and it's deeply important. Historians still argue whether this widespread custom stemmed from a primitive, half-understood link between dirt and disease, or if it was almost entirely a symbolic gesture of social grace. It marked the transition from the outer world to the inner sanctum of the meal, a washing away of symbolic impurities before breaking bread. For a noble, performing this ritual in public was a non-negotiable part of the etiquette, a way of showing respect for your host and your fellow diners. It was a sign that you were civilized. Never mind that just moments ago you might have been scratching your lice-ridden scalp or walking past the odorous plume of the garderobe. What matters here, in the public gaze of the great hall, is not true cleanliness, but the flawless performance of it. Now, with your hands ceremonially cleansed and still faintly smelling of roses, you are ready to proceed to the table. Your hands, now ceremonially clean and dry, are ready for the main event. You approach the high table, which is set on a raised platform, a dais, overlooking the rest of the hall. This physical elevation is a constant, subtle reminder of your elevated social status. Note, the benches for lesser guests below are crowded and noisy, but here on the dais, you have a bit more room. A servant pulls out a heavy chair for you, and you take your seat. Before you, the table setting is startlingly simple. There is no gleaming array of forks and knives for different courses. You find a neatly folded linen napkin, a spoon, likely for any pottage or soup that might be served, and a personal knife. This knife is your primary, and often only, eating utensil. It's a multi-tool, really. It might be the same dagger you carry on your belt for personal defense. Now wiped clean for dining, a proper host will provide knives, but many nobles prefer to bring their own, often with ornate handles of ivory or polished wood. You note that the tip of your provided knife is pointed. The rounded-tipped dinner knife, a French invention intended to reduce tableside stabbings, hasn't become fashionable yet, so a certain level of trust is required among the dining party. And where is your plate? You don't have one, not in the ceramic or porcelain sense. Your plate is a thick, square slab of stale bread, perhaps a day or two old. This is a trencher, from the old French verb trancher, meaning to cut or to slice. Its purpose is to be a disposable, absorbent surface for your food. You'll place your cuts of meat and other morsels directly onto it, and the stale bread will slowly soak up all the gravy, juices, and fat. The meal is a social affair, built around sharing. You are paired with the person sitting next to you. This is your messmate, and together you will share from the same dishes and, most intimately, from the same drinking cup. The concept of a mess comes from the portion of food served to a small group, usually 2 to 4 people. This enforced intimacy is governed by a strict, unspoken code of conduct. You must only use your right hand to eat, keeping your left hand, considered unclean, firmly in your lap. You must not dip a piece of food you've already bitten back into the shared bowl. You certainly mustn't lick your fingers clean too loudly, or use your knife to clean your teeth at the table. Etiquette is everything. A procession of servants enters from the kitchens, their arrival a spectacle in itself. They carry huge wooden or pewter platters, piled high with an astonishing amount of food. The first course might be a great roast, a swan or a peacock, painstakingly cooked and then redressed in its own feathers, to look as if it were still alive and resting on the platter. Or perhaps a whole roasted piglet with an apple in its mouth. A servant approaches your mess pair, carves off several thick slices, and with a deft movement plops them directly onto your bread trencher and that of your partner. You pick up your knife, spearing a manageable piece of the roast. You bring it to your mouth for smaller morsels, or to steady a larger piece while you cut it. You use your fingers. The 3-fingered technique, thumb, index, and middle, is considered the most polite way to handle your food. Your fingers become greasy almost immediately, glistening with rendered fat. This is what your fine linen napkin is for. Between bites, you fastidiously wipe your fingers and your mouth, striving to maintain an air of delicacy amidst the glorious mess. Then comes the wine. A dedicated cupbearer approaches the head of the table. If you are the host or a particularly esteemed guest, he might perform the assay, a ritual tasting to prove the drink is not poisoned. He pours a small amount into the lid of the silver ewer, or a separate small cup, sips it, and waits a moment to demonstrate that he is not about to collapse. Reassured, he fills a large, often communal goblet called a hanap with deep red wine. The cup is passed to you. You take a respectful sip, then pass it to your messmate, who does the same. This continues down the table, the cup being refilled as needed. The shared cup is a powerful symbol of communion and trust, but it's also a remarkably efficient way to share saliva. and whatever germs you and your 50 closest friends might be carrying. The flavors are intense and perhaps a little strange to a modern palate. Spices are everywhere. Medieval European cuisine loved a powerful, heady mix of sweet and savory. Your roasted meat might be slathered in a sauce made with wine, vinegar, and a costly combination of cinnamon, cloves, ginger, and a pinch of sugar. These spices were outrageously expensive, imported over vast distances from the East, and using them liberally was the ultimate culinary power move. It announced your wealth and worldliness with every bite, but these spices serve another, more practical purpose. In an age without refrigeration, keeping meat fresh was a constant challenge. It might be heavily salted, smoked, or pickled to preserve it. But even so, meat could often be a little past its prime. The potent spices helped to mask any hint of gaminess or the beginnings of decay. Historians debate how much spices were truly used to disguise spoiled meat versus simply being an ostentatious display of wealth. It was likely a convenient intersection of both. Why throw out a slightly off piece of venison when you can simply bury it in a delicious, house and impressively expensive blanket of cloves and pepper? Between courses, a servant might bring out a subtlety, an elaborate sculpted food, designed to impress and delight the guests. It could be a delicate jelly molded into the shape of a castle, forecast, or an intricate sculpture made of marzipan or sugar paste, depicting a mythological scene. These were not always meant to be eaten, they were edible art, conversation starters for the wealthy. It's the medieval equivalent of molecular gastronomy, all about presentation and showing off. All the while, the dogs you noticed earlier are a constant presence, a living cleanup crew weaving between the tables. You might toss a bone or a tough piece of gristle over your shoulder to the floor, where it will be greedily snatched up by a hound. They are an accepted and useful part of the dining experience. As the meal draws to a close, you look down at your trencher. The once stiff bread is now a saturated, pulpy sponge of grease, gravy, and wine. Your meal is over, but the trencher's job is not. A servant will collect it, not to throw it away, but to give it as alms to the poor waiting outside the castle gates, or to be added to the slop for the pigs. Even this humble, soggy bread plate is part of the castle's complex, zero-waste ecosystem. You sit back in your chair, full and sleepy from the wine, wiping your greasy fingers on your napkin one last time. After the lingering haze of the feast, a familiar heaviness settles over you. It's not just the wine or the rich food, it's a subtle imbalance you feel deep within your body. The afternoon stretches before you, a time for attending to estate matters, perhaps, or practicing your horsemanship. But this nagging feeling, a touch of indigestion or a faint headache, reminds you of the delicate equilibrium that governs your entire being. In your world, health is not a matter of germs and viruses, but of balance, the ancient theory of the four humors. This medical philosophy, inherited from the ancient Greeks and Romans, dictates that your body is composed of four essential fluids: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Each humor corresponds to an element: air, water, fire, earth, and a season, and possesses certain qualities: hot, cold, wet, dry. Your personal temperament and physical health are entirely dependent on these humors being in perfect harmony. If you are feeling sluggish and a bit feverish, it's likely you have an excess of blood, which is hot and wet. If you are melancholy and quiet, you probably have a surplus of black bile, which is cold and dry. Every ailment, from a common cold to a fit of rage, can be diagnosed within this framework, and the treatments are designed to restore that delicate balance. So, feeling a bit too hotted and you wet from your rich meal and wine, you decide on a common and respected remedy. You send for the barber surgeon. This figure is not a highly trained physician from a university. Those lofty individuals would be far too important to engage in hands-on work. The university-trained doctor might diagnose you from a distance, perhaps by examining a urine sample for its color and smell, but he wouldn't dream of touching you. The practical, messy work falls to the barber surgeon, a skilled craftsman who can give you a haircut, pull a tooth, and perform minor surgery, all with the same set of tools. He arrives in your solar, a private sitting room, carrying a bag with the instruments of his trade. He bows, listens to your complaint of feeling overly full and flushed, and nods with sagely understanding. The diagnosis is clear: an excess of sanguine humor. The cure is equally clear: you must be bled. The process is methodical. You roll up the sleeve of your fine tunic, carefully, so as not to stain the fabric. The barber surgeon selects a small, sharp knife called a lancet. He might first consult an almanac, a popular text known as a zodiac man chart, which shows which parts of the body are governed by which astrological signs. It's crucial not to bleed from a part of the body whose sign is currently dominant in the heavens. This mainstream medical practice blends science, folk belief, and astrology into a single, cohesive system. Once a suitable vein on the inside of your elbow is chosen, he makes a quick, practiced incision. Your dark red blood begins to flow, dripping into a special bowl marked with lines to measure the volume. You sit quietly, watching as your vital fluid leaves your body. The belief is that by removing the excess blood, your body will naturally return to a state of balance. There is no concept of a finite blood supply. It's seen as a regenerating resource. You might lose half a pint, perhaps even a full pint of blood. Afterward, the barber surgeon cleans the wound, applies a salve of herbs, and bandages your arm. You pay him his fee, and you do, perhaps, feel a bit woozy and lightheaded. But this sensation is interpreted not as the onset of anemia, but as the successful calming of your overly hot and energetic humors. You have been medically balanced. For more complex or persistent ailments, the apothecary's chest offers a bewildering array of solutions. Should you feel a persistent ache, or worry about the ever-present threat of plague or poison, you might seek out something more exotic. One of the most prized substances in your medicine cabinet is powdered unicorn horn. This is, of course, not from a mythical horned horse, but is usually the tusk of a narwhal, the unicorn of the sea, imported at enormous cost from the frozen north. It's believed to be a universal antidote, capable of neutralizing any poison and curing a host of diseases. You might take a pinch of the precious white powder mixed into your wine as a preventative measure. It's an incredibly rare and potent symbol of both health and wealth. Even more complex is theriac. This is the ultimate cure-all, a sticky, dark treacle made from a mind-boggling number of ingredients, sometimes over 60. The recipe, originating in ancient Rome, was a closely guarded secret prepared by apothecaries in public ceremonies to prove its authenticity. It often contained things like viper's flesh, opium, cinnamon, and a vast assortment of rare herbs and spices. It was taken for everything from snake bites to indigestion. While some ingredients like opium genuinely had an effect, many others were inert, or, in some cases, actively harmful. It was the medieval equivalent of a patent medicine, promising everything and delivering, well, that was a matter of faith. If you are a noblewoman, your health concerns are further complicated by childbirth. Bringing the next generation of heirs into the world is your primary duty. But it's a perilous one. The birthing chamber is a cloistered, exclusively female space. All men are banished. The windows are sealed to prevent dangerous drafts, and the room is kept warm with a roaring fire. You are attended by a midwife and a host of other women. Hygiene, again, is not the priority. The midwife's hands might be washed, but the general understanding of infection is non-existent. After what could be a long and agonizing labor, your heir is born. The immediate postpartum period is also fraught with risk, with postpartum infection, childbed fever being a common cause of death for new mothers. But assuming both you and the baby survive, your maternal duties might be considered complete. It was exceedingly common for noble and wealthy women to outsource the next stage of motherhood, breastfeeding. You hand your precious, swaddled newborn over to a wet nurse. A wet nurse was a woman, often from a lower class, who had recently given birth herself and was therefore lactating. The choice of a wet nurse was a serious matter. It was believed that a nurse's moral character could be transmitted through her milk, so a prospective nurse would be carefully vetted for her good health, her even temper, and her pious nature. This practice freed you, the noble lady, to quickly resume your social and marital duties, and hopefully to become pregnant again as soon as possible to produce more heirs. This also meant that the bond we now consider fundamental between mother and infant was instead formed between the infant and their nurse, creating complex familial and class dynamics within the noble household. You have secured the lineage, balanced your humors, and now perhaps you can enjoy a moment of fragile, medicated peace as the afternoon sun begins its slow descent, casting long dramatic shadows across the castle courtyard. You find yourself seeking a moment of respite from the duties and diagnoses of the day. You walk the stone corridors again, the air now heavy with the smell of dinner preparations beginning anew in the distant kitchens. Thé disemberi, the herbs strewn on the floor, once fresh and fragrant in the morning, are now crushed and trodden, their scent mingling with the day's accumulated grime. Remember that sophisticated pomander you carried at your waist? This is when you might discreetly lift it to your nose, taking a deep breath of clove and musk to overpower the general ambiance of the great stone house you call home. This pervasive layering of scents is the soundtrack of your life. Your destination is a particular treat, a luxury you might indulge in, perhaps once a year, or if you're very decadent, once every few months. You are going to take a bath. This is not a simple affair of hopping in a tiled tub. Bathing on this scale is a major logistical undertaking, a social event that requires planning and labor. Your servants have been preparing for hours. First, they must bring in the bathtub itself. It's a large portable wooden cask, like a shallow barrel, that might be lined with linen to prevent you from getting splinters. They place it in your chamber, hopefully near the fireplace for warmth, creating a temporary, steamy oasis. Then comes the water. There is no plumbing to pipe hot water directly to you. Instead, servants must form a bucket brigade, hauling countless pails of water from the castle well or a nearby stream, heating it in massive cauldrons over the kitchen fire, and then lugging the steaming, sloshing buckets up winding stone staircases to your room. It is a slow, back-breaking process. Finally, the tub is filled with pleasantly hot water. To this, they might add handfuls of fragrant herbs like chamomile, lavender, or mint, turning your bath into a giant pot of human tea. This is less for cleaning and more for the pleasant aroma and the perceived medicinal benefits of the herbs. You disrobe, handing your magnificent unwashed outer garments to a servant to be brushed down. You step into the tub and sink into the warm water with a sigh. A servant might stand by to gently wash you with a soft cloth, and a small piece of that lye-based soap we talked about. Use sparingly and carefully. It is a moment of profound, muscle-relaxing pleasure, but you might not be alone. The great annual bath was often a social affair. Your spouse might join you, or perhaps a close friend or two. Small wooden trays might be floated on the water, bearing goblets of wine and sweet treats, turning your bath into a kind of hot tub party. It's a moment of relaxation, conversation, and conviviality. Given the sheer effort involved in preparing a single bath, it made sense to get as much social mileage out of it as possible. Historians still argue about the frequency of bathing in the medieval period, with some evidence suggesting the wealthy bathed more often than commonly believed, but it was certainly far from a daily ritual. The sheer effort ensured it remained a special occasion. Once you've soaked to your heart's content, feeling cleaner than you have in months, you step out onto a waiting linen sheet. Servants towel you dry and help you into a fresh linen chemise. The feeling of truly clean skin against clean linen is a rare and cherished sensation. The dirty bathwater, a gray herbal soup, will then be bailed out bucket by bucket and hauled away. The day is now fully spent. The light outside has faded from orange to a deep, velvety blue. The great hall is lit with flickering torches and tallow candles. Made from rendered animal fat, they give off a smoky, greasy light and a distinctive smell. After a lighter evening meal, perhaps some bread, cheese, and leftover wine from the midday feast, a sense of quiet begins to descend upon the castle. The The servants bank the fires, the hounds curl up to sleep, and the heavy doors are barred for the night. You make your way back up the now darkened stairway to your bedchamber. The room feels a little warmer now, the residual heat from your bath and the fireplace lingering in the air. A servant has already been in to turn down your bed, perhaps placing a warming pan, a metal container filled with hot coals from the fire, between the sheets to chase away the damp chill. And so your day ends as it began. You climb into the great four-poster bed, drawing the heavy curtains closed around you, creating that familiar, intimate pocket of space. You sink back into the rustling straw or feather mattress, the same mattress with its community of tiny, burrowing tenants. Your spouse or a bed-sharing companion settles in beside you, a familiar source of warmth in the cool night. The chamber pot is once again tucked discreetly beneath the bed. Ready for its nightly duties, you pull the heavy furs and woolen blankets up to your chin, the smell of wood smoke, old velvet, and perhaps the faint, fading ghost of lavender from your bath surrounding you. The sounds of the castle die down into a low hum, the crackle of the last embers in the hearth, the whisper of the wind against the stone walls, the distant cry of an owl. You close your eyes, a person of immense wealth and status, drifting off to sleep in a world of beautiful, aromatic, unwashed grandeur, a world of incredible splendor and secreted grime, where perfume battles odors, spices fight decay, and the chamber pot holds a place of honor right next to the bed. It's a world where your daily routine, a symphony of sensations that would overwhelm a modern visitor, is simply the comforting, familiar rhythm of life itself. How people lit their homes in the Middle Ages? The day is ending. You can feel it more than you can see it. A slow cooling of the air, a subtle shift in the sounds filtering in from outside. The birdsong is quieting. The distant bleating of sheep grows softer through the single, unglazed window of your small home. A space more accurately described as a shuttered opening. The light has turned from a warm gold to a cool, dusty blue. You are sitting on a simple wooden stool, the rough-hewn timber smoothed only by long use. The floor beneath your feet is packed earth, cool and slightly damp. Look around your one-room world. The walls are wattle and daub, a sturdy lattice of woven branches packed with a mixture of wet soil, clay, and straw. In the fading light, you can make out the lumpy, uneven texture of their surface. The ceiling above you is low, thatched with reeds and blackened with years of smoke, and it's that smoke you notice next. It hangs in the air, a constant, hazy companion, catching the last of the day's light in its ghostly wisps. It makes your eyes water, just a little, as it always does. You've learned to live with the sensation, the way you've learned to live with the persistent damp, and the drafts that sneak through the walls like curious mice. In the center of the room is the source of that smoke, and the heart of your home. The hearth. There is no chimney here, no grand stone mantelpiece. It is simply a designated patch of floor, perhaps lined with a few flat stones, where a fire is always kept smoldering. During the day, it cooked your meager meals. Now, as darkness truly begins to fall, it is transforming into your primary source of light. This central, open hearth is the great multi-tool of the medieval household. A combination stove, furnace, and reading lamp, all rolled into one smoky, inefficient package. You lean forward and push a stray log deeper into the glowing embers. With a stick, flames lick up, tentative at first. Then, with a little more confidence, they dance and writhe, casting a warm, unsteady glow across the room. Your own shadow stretches and shrinks on the wall behind you, a long, dark puppet, mimicking your every move. The firelight is alive. It makes the familiar shapes of your home. The sleeping platform covered in straw, the wooden chest holding all your worldly goods, the row of clay pots against the wall, seeming to shift and breathe in the flickering gloom. This fire is your anchor in the darkness. It provides warmth against the chill of the night and a bubble of orange light in a world that is rapidly being swallowed by black. But the fire is stationary. Its light reaches only so far. What if you need to fetch something from the far corner of the room? What if you need to step outside for a moment? The fire cannot follow you, and so you turn to the evening's task. On a low table beside you sits a shallow earthenware dish filled with a thick, greasy substance. It is kitchen fat, painstakingly collected over weeks. Every last drop of grease from cooking, every bit of rendered animal fat, it all ends up here. The smell is distinctive. It's the heavy, cloying scent of old meat and rancid oil. Let's just say it's not a fragrance that would sell well in a modern candle shop. Maybe they could call it essence of serfdom. Beside the dish is a bundle of long, slender reeds. These are common bulrushes, gathered from the marshy ground down by the river. They've been left to dry for a few days, and now they are ready for their transformation. This is the moment where you become a craftsman, a creator of light. You pick up one of the rushes. It's about 1.5 feet long, and your first job is a delicate one. With a sharp thumbnail, you begin to peel away the outer green layer, the rind, working carefully from top to bottom. But you don't peel it all off. You must leave a single, narrow spine of green running the entire length of the rush. This tiny strip is crucial. It's the backbone that will hold the soft, white pith together. It's a fiddly, frustrating process. Peel too much, and the pith collapses into a useless fluff. Peel too little, and it won't soak up enough fat. Once you have a dozen or so of these carefully peeled rushes, it's time for the main event. You gently warm the dish of fat by placing it near the hearth, just close enough for the lumpy, pale grease to melt into a semi-liquid state. The smell intensifies. You take a peeled rush by one end, holding it taut, and you draw it slowly and steadily through the warm, melted fat. You can feel the slight drag as the porous pith soaks up the grease. The goal is an even coat, from one end to the other. You lift the now dripping rush from the dish. It has transformed from a pale, feathery wand into a greasy, translucent stick, sagging slightly under its new weight. You lay it carefully on a piece of bark to cool and harden, and you pick up the next one. This is your evening's work, dipping, coating, and setting aside one rush at a time. It's repetitive, it's meditative, and it's incredibly greasy. Your fingers are soon slick with foul-smelling fat that will take days to wash off completely. Historians still argue whether different types of animal fat, mutton versus beef, for instance, produced a marginally better or longer-lasting light, a debate that feels incredibly important when you're the one stuck making the things. Finally, you have a small collection of finished rushlights, cooled and solidified. They look like sad, waxy twigs. You take one of the best-looking ones and carry it over to the hearth. You don't have a fancy holder, but a simple block of wood with a V-shaped crack in it will do. You wedge the bottom end of the rushlight into the crack, angling it slightly. Then you lean into the hearth. Find a glowing ember on the end of a stick and touch it to the tip of your greasy creation. It sputters, it hisses, a tiny angry flame catches, and a plume of thick black smoke rises from it. The rushlight is lit. The light it gives off is feeble, a mere pinprick compared to the robust glow of the fire. It's a tiny yellow-orange flame that flickers and dances with every passing draft. The light is just enough to see the immediate area around it, enough to mend a garment, perhaps, or to see your way across the room without tripping over the dog. But it comes at a cost. The smell of the burning fat now joins the wood smoke in the air, adding its own unique perfume to the atmosphere, and it drips. A slow, steady trickle of hot, melted grease runs down the side of the rush, pooling on the wooden block below. You have to be careful where you put it. Plausens, this is your light. For the vast majority of people in this age, this simple, smelly, dripping rushlight is the only portable illumination they will ever know. It represents a small victory against the overwhelming dark. You watch its tiny flame waver, casting miniature, dancing shadows of its own. It won't last long, perhaps 20 minutes at most, but you have a whole bundle of them, enough to last the evening. For now, in this small, smoky room, with the great fire dying down to embers, and your greasy little torch sputtering beside you, You have everything you need. The night is deep, but you are not entirely in the dark. Your first rushlight is beginning to fail. The tiny flame has eaten its way down the greasy reed, and now it sputters and shrinks, threatening to extinguish itself in its own puddle of melted fat. Were fairy comfy farting, you watch it die, a final, smoky sigh, and the room plunges back into a deeper gloom, lit only by the faint, pulsing glow of the hearth's embers. The darkness feels heavy again, pressing in from the corners of the room. Another 20 minutes of light gone. But tonight is a special occasion. Perhaps you have sold a few extra eggs at the market, or a traveling merchant paid you a precious copper coin for your help with a stuck wagon wheel. Tonight you are not limited to the fleeting stinking light of a greased reed. Tonight you can afford a small luxury. You move to the wooden chest that holds your few treasures and lift the heavy lid. Tucked inside, wrapped carefully in a piece of linen to protect it from dirt and mice, is your prize. A candle. This is not a candle as you might picture it now. Not a clean, white, elegant taper of wax. This is a tallow candle. You unwrap it, and the waxy, slightly soft surface is cool in your hand. It's a lumpy, grayish-yellow cylinder, and it smells quite distinctly of cooked beef. Tallow is rendered animal fat, primarily from cattle or sheep, so your candle is, in essence, a solid block of mutton grease with a string running through it. The smell is thick and animalic, a scent that promises a brighter light but also a richer, more pervasive odor than your rushlight. It's not a scent you'd choose for a relaxing bath unless you wanted to feel like you were bathing in a pot of stew. Stew. You did not make this candle. Making tallow candles was a specific, often regulated and famously smelly trade. You can picture the chandler's workshop in the nearby town. A huge cauldron of rendered fat, the suet, bubbling over a fire, filling the entire street with its heavy, greasy stench. Butchers and chandlers were often neighbors, for obvious reasons, forming a sort of aromatic nucleus in any medieval town. The chandler, an artisan of light, would have a frame hung with dozens of wicks made from twisted strands of flax or rush pith. He would dip the entire frame into the vat of hot, liquid tallow, pull it out, and let the thin layer cool and harden. Then he would dip it again, and again, and again. Each dip added a new layer of fat, slowly building the candle to its desired thickness. It was a slow, repetitive art, requiring patience and a strong stomach. The very best chandlers might use molds, pewter or tin tubes, into which they'd string a wick and pour the hot tallow, letting it set into a more uniform shape. The candle you hold in your hand is not one of those. It's clearly a dipped candle, thicker at the bottom than at the top, with a slightly lumpy, uneven surface that tells the story of its creation. You don't have a fancy candlestick. Those are for lords and wealthy merchants, but you have a pricket, a simple piece of wood with a short, sharp iron spike pointing upwards. You carefully, firmly press the base of your tallow candle onto the spike. It sits there a little crooked, looking slightly precarious. Fire safety regulations were, shall we say, a bit more relaxed back then. You take another smoldering stick from the hearth and bring the glowing tip to the candle's wick. The wick, made of dried rush pith, catches quickly. It sputters for a moment. Then the flame steadies, growing larger and brighter than the rushlight's ever was. This is a significant improvement. The single flame seems to push the darkness back a few more feet, illuminating a wider circle of your small home. Stronger, less fragile. You can actually see the texture of the daub on the far wall now, not just its vague shape. The shadows are still there, of course, but they are sharper, more defined. They seem less like living things and more like simple absences of light. But this brighter light comes with its own set of particularities. A plume of black smoke, thicker than the rushlights, curls up from the flame towards the already sooty rafters. And as the tallow melts, it gives off its signature scent, burning fat. The air grows thick with it, an olfactory blanket that will cling to your clothes, your hair, and every surface in the room. You also notice that the flame, while bright, is a bit unruly. It gutters and dances, not just with the drafts, but with the very nature of its fuel. and it needs to be tended, here you encounter a classic medieval inconvenience. The wick of your tallow candle does not burn away at the same rate as the fuel around it. As the tallow melts down, the wick becomes longer and longer. If you just leave it, the flame will grow large and smoky, consuming too much fuel and giving off less light. Before eventually sputtering out in a pool of its own making, you must from time to time trim the wick. This is a delicate, greasy little piece of surgery. For this, a special tool was invented, a pair of candle snuffers. They looked like scissors, but one of the blades had a small box attached to it. The idea was to snip the glowing, charred end of the wick and catch it in the box, preventing the hot, greasy bit from falling onto the table and, setting your house on fire. You don't have a fancy pair of snuffers, Fonduferi. You use the tip of a small knife, carefully pinching the blackened end of the wick and flicking it into the hearth. The flame immediately shrinks, then burns cleanly and brightly once more. This is the rhythm of the tallow candle. Burn, trim, burn, trim. It's a small, constant chore in exchange for a bubble of light. Historians still argue whether tallow candles were an everyday necessity or a significant luxury for the common person. For a peasant farmer, a single candle might represent the value of a day's labor, something to be used sparingly. For a skilled artisan in town, a weaver, a baker, a blacksmith, they might have been a more regular part of life, essential for extending the workday past sunset. This candle in your home is a clear sign of status. It says you are not at the very bottom of the social ladder. You are someone who can afford to buy a little time back from the night. It is a humble extravagance, a small rebellion against the natural order of the sun. You watch the flame steady for now, its warm light a comfort. The pool of melted tallow at its base shimmers. It's a messy, imperfect, and smelly source of illumination. But as it holds the deep, profound darkness of the medieval night at bay, it feels like a small, personal sun. And in this world, that is more than enough. The tallow candle continues its sputtering, smoky work, filling your small home with its greasy light and pungent aroma. It is a vast improvement over the rushlight, a little island of clarity in a sea of gloom. But it is still a dim and dirty light by any modern standard. It is the light of the common folk, of the working artisan, of the striving peasant who has had a good month. It is not the light of power. It is not the light of wealth. To experience that, we must leave your humble wattle and daub cottage behind. Let your imagination drift up the social ladder, past the merchants and the minor clergy, all the way to a place of stone and soaring ceilings. Picture yourself now, not on a dirt floor, but on one of polished flagstones, smoothed by the passage of countless servants. You are in the great hall of a castle, or perhaps the private study of a wealthy bishop. The air here is different. It is still cool, as stone buildings always are, but it lacks the damp, earthy smell of your home, and most noticeably, the ever-present haze of smoke is gone. Look up. The ceiling is high above you, lost in shadow, supported by great carved beams of ancient oak. There is a fireplace here, a true one, a gaping maw of stone built into the wall with a chimney that, in theory, draws the smoke up and out of the room. It's a moderately effective innovation, which means the room is only mostly filled with smoke, rather than completely. A definite upgrade, but the fire is for warmth, for light. Your eyes are drawn to a magnificent object hanging from the center of the ceiling, a great iron chandelier, an oriel as it might have been called, bristling with candles. And these are not the lumpy, grayish, foul-smelling cylinders of tallow, you know. These candles are different. They are smooth and straight and a creamy pale white. You can sense, even from a distance, that they burn with a different quality of light. These are beeswax candles. Their story begins not with a butcher, but with a beekeeper. Wax is the structural material of the honeycomb, a biological marvel that bees secrete to build their homes and store their honey. To get the wax, one must first get the honey. After the honey was pressed from the comb, the remaining waxy residue would be melted down in hot water, separating the pure wax from impurities like leftover honey, pollen, and the occasional unfortunate bee. This purified wax, skimmed from the surface, was the raw material for the finest light source the Middle Ages had to offer. Unlike the dipping process for tallow, beeswax was often poured into molds to create perfectly uniform, elegant tapers. The result was a candle that was, in every way, superior. You approach one of the candles burning in a stand on a nearby table. The flame is bright, steady, and clear. It doesn't gutter and spit like the tallow candle. It casts a clean white light that renders colors more truly and makes reading a pleasure rather than a strain. And the smoke? There is almost none. A thin, pale wisp rises from the flame, almost invisible. And the smell? Lean in closer. It is a delicate, sweet, honeyed fragrance that perfumes the air rather than fouls it. It is the scent of luxury, the scent of the divine. This heavenly light came at a heavenly price. Beeswax was immensely expensive. It was a byproduct of honey production, and the yield of wax per hive was relatively small. A pound of beeswax could cost 4 to 6 times as much as a pound of tallow. Its use was therefore restricted to two main spheres of medieval life: the very rich and the very holy. The church was the single largest consumer of beeswax in the Middle Ages. Its sweet smell was considered a fitting offering to God, and its pure, bright light symbolized the divine light of Christ. Standing in a great cathedral, filled with the light and scent of hundreds of beeswax candles, was a truly spiritual and incredibly expensive sensory experience. For the nobility, burning beeswax was a conspicuous display of wealth, a way to show that you could afford to burn money, quite literally, for no reason other than your own comfort. But beeswax candles were not the only option for the wealthy. Over on a scribe's desk in the corner of the room, you see another source of light, FIREPLACE, one with an even more ancient pedigree. It is an oil lamp. This is not a grand, genie-inhabiting affair, but a simple, functional object. It might be a shallow dish of pottery or metal, with a small, pinched spout to hold a wick, a design that had remained largely unchanged since Roman times. Or it could be a more sophisticated model, a covered vessel of bronze or pewter with a dedicated filling hole. And another for the wick, a device known as a cresset lamp. Tin. The wick, often made of moss or twisted cloth, draws fuel up from the reservoir to the flame. And the fuel? The very best, cleanest burning, and most expensive fuel was olive oil. In the Mediterranean world, olive oil was the standard fuel for lamps for millennia. But here in the cold, damp north of Europe, olives do not grow. Olive oil had to be imported over vast distances, making it a pure luxury item. Burning it in a lamp was like seasoning your food with gold dust. Other, less desirable oils were sometimes used, fish oil being a particularly pungent, if effective, option. A well-known medieval medical text, the Tranquil, even includes a quirky recipe for a sort of lady's perfume, which some fringe historians suggest might have been used to counteract the smell of fish oil lamps. It's an amusing thought, a noblewoman dabbing herself with rosewater to avoid smelling like a fishing trawler in her own bedroom. The light from the oil lamp is good. It's comparable to a beeswax candle, steady and clean, especially with high-quality oil. It's also more efficient in some ways. A lamp could be refilled, and a good one could burn for hours unattended, without the need for constant wick trimming. But they were also messy, they could be spilled, and they required regular cleaning to prevent the wick from becoming clogged. You stand in this great room, bathed in the gentle, clean glow of beeswax and fine oil. The air is clear and smells faintly of honey. Here, the night is not a fearful, oppressive thing to be endured. It is merely a quiet time, an extension of the day made comfortable and bright by sheer expense. You can read, you can write, you can play a game of chess. The darkness has been tamed, domesticated by wealth. You think back to your own small home, to the flickering, stinking tallow candle, and the even fainter rushlight. The gulf between those two worlds is vast. It's a difference not just in brightness, but in experience. The quality of the light you lived by was a direct reflection of your place in the rigid hierarchy of this world. From the greasy, sputtering flame of the peasant to the clean, sweet-smelling glow of the prince, The story of medieval lighting is a story of inequality, written in smoke and shadows. You linger for a moment in the clean, honey-scented air of the great hall, surrounded by the bright, steady flames of beeswax and costly oil. It's a peaceful, scholarly light, a light that invites quiet contemplation or the turning of a page. But this is not your world. The scent of tallow and wood smoke calls you back. Let your mind drift away from the stone walls and back to your own small, smoky home. You are back on your rough-hewn stool. The single tallow candle burning down, its flame beginning to gutter as the wick grows long again. The air is thick with its familiar, greasy smell. Outside, the world is utterly and completely dark. There is no moon tonight, and the village around you is not a comforting grid of streetlights, but an archipelago of isolated, lightless huts floating in an ocean of black. To step outside is to step into nothingness. And this is where the constant nagging companion of every medieval person comes to the fore. Fear. Fear of the dark, yes, but more practically, fear of fire. Every single source of light you possess, from the central hearth to the humble rushlight to the luxurious tallow candle, is an open flame, and it exists inside a house made of wood, straw, and dried mud. Your thatched roof, dried by the summer sun, is basically a giant pile of kindling perched directly above your head. A stray spark from the hearth, a tipped-over candle, a rushlight holder that slips. Any one of these tiny accidents could mean utter devastation. House fires were terrifyingly common and incredibly destructive. A fire could consume a peasant's home in minutes, taking everything they owned with it. In the tightly packed streets of a town or city, a fire in one house could quickly become a raging inferno that destroyed entire neighborhoods. This is why many towns had a curfew, a word that comes from the old French couvre-feu, literally meaning cover fire. At the ringing of a bell, all households were required to bank their hearths, putting out any open flames to reduce the risk of an unattended fire starting in the night. It was a legally enforced bedtime, dictated by collective fire safety. You look at your own small candle. Its light seems so precious, so vital, yet it is also a tiny, tame dragon sitting on your table. You must be vigilant. Before you sleep, you will have to extinguish it. The choice is a stark one: risk burning to death in your sleep, or plunge your home into total darkness. Most people, sensibly, chose the darkness. This nightly return to darkness shaped the very rhythm of life. The setting of the sun didn't just mean it was time for bed, it meant the end of most productive work. For a farmer or a laborer, work was dictated by daylight. For an artisan, the expensive and imperfect light of a candle could extend the workday, but only for so long. The night was a time for rest, for storytelling around the dying embers of the hearth, for huddling together, for warmth and security. It wasn't a dead time, but it was a constrained time. You decide the candle has burned long enough. It's an expense, after all. You don't use a fancy snuffer. You use the original, built-in model, your own thumb and forefinger, moistened with a little saliva. With a quick, practiced pinch, you snuff out the flame. The wick sizzles for a second, releasing a final, pungent puff of smoke, and then darkness. Absolute darkness. Your eyes, accustomed to the candlelight, are now useless. You are plunged into a blackness so complete it feels tangible, like a thick velvet cloth has been thrown over your head. The only light remaining is the faint, deep red pulse of the embers in the hearth, a tiny beating heart in the center of the room. It's not enough to see by, but it's enough to know you're not entirely alone. You sit for a moment, letting your other senses take over. You can hear the faint rustle of mice in the thatch above. You can feel the persistent draft from the shuttered window on your cheek. You can smell the complex soup of odors that is your home, the lingering grease from the candle, the ever-present wood smoke, the damp earth of the floor, the faint scent of straw from your sleeping palate. This is the sensory world of the medieval night. The social implications of this darkness were profound. The night was a time of increased danger. Travel was treacherous. The roads, uneven and unmarked by day, became death traps by night. Without light, you could easily trip, fall into a ditch, or wander into a bog. And then there were the human dangers. The darkness provided cover for thieves, brigands, and anyone with ill intent. One quirky historical tidbit is that in many medieval towns, people who had to be out after curfew, like the town watch, were legally required to carry a lantern. This was not just for their own safety, to see where they were going, but also to make them visible to others. An unidentified person moving in the dark was automatically an object of suspicion. Light was a marker of legitimacy. Slowly, carefully, feeling your way with your hands, you move from your stool to the sleeping platform in the corner. You lie down on the rustling straw mattress, pulling a coarse woolen blanket over yourself. The embers of the hearth continue their slow, rhythmic glow. It's a comforting presence, a silent promise of warmth and light when the sun returns. You close your eyes, though it makes little difference to what you can see. The day is over. The brief, smoky battle against the night has been fought, and the darkness has, as always, won. But it's a temporary victory. In a few hours, the first pale, gray light of dawn will begin to seep through the cracks in the shutters. Begin their song. You will rise, uncover the embers in the hearth, and coax them back to life, starting the cycle all over again. For now, you lie in the quiet dark, a darkness unimaginable to a world of electric lights and hour convenience. It is a darkness that dictates the pace of life, fosters a healthy fear of fire, and makes every single source of light, from a greasy rush to a beeswax taper, a small, precious miracle. You listen to the quiet sounds of the house settling around you and drift off to sleep, waiting for the sun, the ultimate source of all light, to return and grant you another day. A day in a medieval village. The first thing you notice is the cold. It's a damp, deep cold that has settled into the very bones of the house overnight. It clings to your woolen blanket, seeps up from the packed earth floor, and presses against your face. There is no sound but the soft, rhythmic breathing of your family sleeping beside you, on the single, large, straw-stuffed pallet that serves as the communal bed. The air is thick, heavy with the smells of sleep, stale wood smoke, and the faint, earthy scent of the animals who share this space with you, or at least the part of it sectioned off by a low wattle fence. You are awake before the sun. There is no gentle alarm, no gradual lightening of the sky. Through a window pane, your internal clock, honed by a lifetime of seasons, tells you that dawn is near. That and your roommate, a prize-winning hen, has started to rustle in her corner, offering a few sleepy clucks, a gentle reminder that the world's work waits for no one. You slide carefully from the pallet, trying not to disturb the others. The floor is cold and unforgiving against the soles of your bare feet. The darkness in your one-room home is almost total. It's a wattle and daub box, really, with a low thatched roof and a single opening for a window, currently sealed against the night air by a wooden shutter. The darkness is so complete you navigate by memory, your hands outstretched, feeling for the familiar landmarks of your small world. Your first and most important task awaits you in the center of the room, the hearth. Last night, before succumbing to sleep, you performed the ritual of the couvre-feu, the covering of the fire. You carefully buried the glowing heart of the fire under a thick blanket of ash, to keep it alive, smoldering through the night. To let the fire die completely would be a minor disaster, forcing you to trudge to a neighbor's home, dish in hand, to beg for a few hot embers. You kneel on the cold floor. The hearth is not a grand stone fireplace. It is a simple clay-lined pit in the middle of the room. There is no chimney. The smoke from this fire simply rises, mushrooming through the living space, finding its own lazy way out through the thatch or the window. It's why the rafters above are permanently blackened, slick with a layer of creosote, and why you always have a slight cough in the winter. With your hands, you carefully scrape away the gray, insulating ash. Beneath it, you find what you were hoping for, a cluster of deep red, pulsing embers, glowing like sleeping dragon's eyes in the gloom. A faint warmth radiates from them, a promise of the day to come. You lean in close and blow a gentle, steady stream of air. The embers brighten, from red to a brilliant orange. You add your carefully gathered kindling, A handful of dry moss, some brittle twigs. They smoke, then hesitate, and then, with a soft whoosh, a tiny flame catches. It is the first light of your day. A small, hungry flame that you feed with slightly larger sticks. It licks and dances, casting your stooped shadow against the wall. A giant, wavering puppet. The smoke begins to rise, sharp and acrid in the cold air, stinging your eyes. You don't mind. It's the smell of warmth, of safety, of another day beginning. As the fire gains confidence, turning into a proper, crackling blaze, the rest of the family begins to stir. There's no grand morning routine here. You probably slept in your under-tunic, a long linen shirt, so getting dressed simply means pulling on your outer garments, a pair of rough wool breeches, or brays, and another, thicker tunic over the top. The cloth is coarse and itchy, but it is durable and warm. Your shoes, if you have them, are simple leather turn shoes, soft and easily worn out. Breakfast is a simple affair. On the iron hook above the fire a pot hangs. It contains pottage, a thick, bubbling stew of grains, oats, barley, and whatever vegetables were on hand. Peas, beans, onions, maybe a few greens from the small garden patch behind the house. It is the perpetual stew, a culinary creation that has been on a low simmer since last Tuesday, with new ingredients added as old ones are eaten. You ladle a portion into a wooden bowl. It is warm, bland, and filling. Alongside it you have a piece of bread, not fine white wheat bread. That is for the lord of the manor. This is a heavy, dark loaf of rye or barley bread, dense and chewy. To drink, you have a mug of small beer or weak ale. The water from the village well or stream is often untrustworthy, a vector for sickness. The brewing process, however, kills most of the germs, making the ale a safer, if not particularly intoxicating, choice. Historians still argue whether the average peasant diet, based heavily on this kind of fare, bar, was nutritionally adequate or a state of perpetual, low-level malnutrition. As you eat, the sounds of the village filter in from outside. The crowing of roosters is now a full-throated chorus. You hear the lowing of a cow, the bleating of sheep, the distant clang of the blacksmith's hammer already at work. The village is waking up. You finish your meal and step outside for the first time. The air is crisp and cold, and the sky to the east is a pale, bruised purple. Your cottage is one of perhaps 30 or 40 others, clustered loosely around a central green and a small stone church. They are all much like yours, timber-framed, with wattle and daub walls and shaggy thatched roofs that sag in the middle like old nags. A thin plume of smoke rises from every one of them, merging into a hazy canopy over the village. You have a few more chores before the real work begins. You let the chickens out of their coop, scattering some grain for them. You must keep a close eye on them. According to the manor court rolls, a man could be fined for letting his hen scratch up a neighbor's vegetable garden. A surprisingly common and serious. This small flock is one of your most valuable assets. You check on the family's cow in her small byre, giving her fresh water and hay. Her milk is vital. The sun is just beginning to break over the horizon now. Now its first rays spilling across the landscape, turning the morning mist to gold. The day's work looms. Most of your life is spent in service to the land. I knew, and more specifically, in service to the Lord who owns it. It is time to head to the fields. You grab your tools, perhaps a heavy-bladed hoe or a sickle, depending on the season, and join the slow trickle of other villagers making their way out of the cluster of homes and towards the vast, open fields that surround your world. The day has truly begun. You walk away from the huddle of smoky cottages, the path beneath your feet, a well-worn track of mud and stone. The air smells of damp earth and distant livestock. All around you, the village is emptying out as men, women, and even older children head towards the same destination. The fields. This is the heart of your world, the great, open expanse of land that sustains everyone from your own family to the Lord in his stone manor house on the hill. As you get closer, the landscape resolves itself into a peculiar pattern. You are not walking towards a single neat field, but a vast unfenced patchwork quilt of cultivation. This is the open field system, a communal way of farming that has dominated this landscape for centuries. The manor's arable land is divided into 2 or 3 enormous fields. One of these fields lies fallow each year, left to rest and recover its nutrients, a simple but effective method of crop rotation. The other fields are under cultivation, and as you look across them, you see they are not single blocks of crops. Instead, each massive field is divided into countless long, narrow strips of land called sellions. Imagine a football field, but instead of green turf, it's plowed earth, and instead of being one continuous playing surface, it's been sliced lengthwise into dozens of narrow ribbons, and each one separated from its neighbor by a thin, unplowed bulk of grass or a shallow furrow. This is what you see before you, and somewhere in this immense, striped tapestry are your strips. Your family does not own land, in the modern sense. You hold it from the lord of the manor. In exchange for your small cottage, a garden plot, and the right to farm, you owe the lord service. A mainstream historical fact of life here is the concept of the demesne, the lord's own land, and the peasant holdings. A certain number of days per week, you are required to work on the lord's strips, cultivating his crops for his sole benefit. This is your rent, paid not in coin but in labor. The rest of the time, you are free to work your own strips, the produce from which will feed your family for the year. The problem is, your strips are not all conveniently located in one place. You might have one strip here, near the path, another is a 10-minute walk away, sandwiched between strips worked by your neighbor Thomas and the widow Elspeth. Another 2 are on the far side of the great field. This scattering of strips is, in its own strange way, a form of fairness. It ensures that everyone gets a share of both the good land, well drained, and fertile, and the bad, rocky and wet. It also ensures a spectacular amount of walking. You spend a good portion of your day just trudging from one of your agricultural responsibilities to the next. Today is a plowing day. The fallow field is being broken up for autumn planting. You don't own a horse. Those are expensive, high-maintenance animals, usually reserved for the lord or for knights. You also don't own a plow. That is a massive, costly piece of equipment. The village's heavy-wheeled plow, with its iron plowshare, is a communal resource, likely owned by the lord or a syndicate of wealthier peasants, and to pull it you need a team of oxen. You see them now, a team of 8 massive, slow-moving beasts, yoked together, patiently waiting. Their breath steams in the cool morning air. A boy stands at their head, ready to guide them with a long goad. Another man is at the handles of the great plow, ready to wrestle it through the soil. Your job, along with several other villagers, is to walk alongside, breaking up large clods of earth with a heavy mallet, clearing stones from the path, and generally making sure the whole slow, ponderous operation proceeds smoothly. Overseeing it all is the reeve. He is one of you, a fellow villager, but he has been elected or appointed to act as the lord's foreman. Foreman is a difficult position. He is responsible for making sure the lord's work gets done, for keeping track of everyone's labor obligations, and for settling minor disputes. He stands with his hands on his hips, his gaze sharp, making sure no one is slacking. To be the reeve is to be distrusted by both the lord above and the villagers below. Not exactly a job you put on your resume for fun. The work begins. The boy calls to the oxen, and with a great collective sigh and the creaking of leather and wood, the team lurches forward. The iron plowshare bites into the earth, and a long, dark ribbon of soil peels away, curling over like a wave. The smell of freshly turned earth fills the air, a rich, fertile perfume that speaks of future harvests. The wording non-vance. The work is hard. It is repetitive, back-breaking labor. You walk, you swing your mallet, you heave a rock out of the way. You walk some more. The sun climbs higher in the sky, a pale disk in the hazy air. There are no coffee breaks. There is no lunch hour. You might stop for a moment to take a drink of ale from a leather flask and eat a hunk of the dark bread you brought with you, but the rhythm of the work is relentless. It is dictated by the slow, steady pace of the oxen. Yeah, You exchange a few words with the people working alongside you. News is shared. Who is sick, whose daughter is to be married, whether the Lord's steward is in a foul mood this week. You might share a joke, something simple and earthy. Humor is a vital lubricant for a life of hard labor. You might also grumble quietly, out of the Reeve's earshot, about the number of days you owe the Lord. Bro for Jen, Tess and Ting. Historians still argue whether the relationship between lord and peasant was one of paternalistic care or pure exploitation. From your vantage point, leaning on your mallet and feeling the ache in your back, it probably feels a lot like the latter. Hours pass. The sun reaches its zenith. The team has made several long passes, turning a significant portion of the field from weedy pasture into dark, ready soil. The work on the Lord's demesne is finished for the morning. Now you are free to tend to your own strips. You trudge over to one of your narrow plots. Here the work is on a smaller scale. You might be weeding with a hand hoe, or if it is harvest time, cutting your own grain with a sickle. Every stalk of wheat, every single bean is precious. This is your food, your survival. One quirky but important aspect of this system was the practice of gleaning was officially declared over. The very poorest members of the community, often widows and children, were allowed to go into the fields and pick up any grains that had been dropped or missed. It was a recognized form of charity, a safety net woven into the fabric of the agricultural year. The sun begins its slow descent towards the west. Your back aches. Your hands are calloused and sore. You have spent the day under an open sky, your life measured in long furrows of earth. It is time to leave the fields. You gather your tools and begin the long walk back towards the village, trees, corns, your shadow stretching out long before you on the dusty path. Your shoulders ache from the morning's labor. A dull, persistent complaint that is as much a part of your life as the rising sun. But the day's work is not quite finished. While the plowing is done, there are still errands that tether you to the village hub. You leave the path that winds towards your cottage and instead take a fork that leads down towards the river. Wart, the source of life for this community. You can hear your destination before you can see it. A rhythmic, churning splash and a low, grinding rumble that vibrates through the soles of your feet. This is the sound of the Lord's mill. It stands astride the river, a sturdy stone and timber building, water cascading over its great wooden wheel in a perpetual, noisy cycle. The air around it is damp, smelling of wet stone and river weeds. As you step inside, the noise becomes a deafening roar. The entire building seems to tremble with the power of the water being translated into mechanical force. So now, the air is thick with a fine, flory dust that coats every surface in a pale film and catches in the back of your throat. It's warm inside, a product of the immense friction of the two massive millstones, one grinding upon the other. You are here because you have no choice. This is a banal mill, a cornerstone of the manorial economy. All tenants of the manor are legally obligated to bring their grain here to be ground into flour, and for this privilege you must pay. The payment is not in coin, but in kind. The miller, a man perpetually covered in a fine layer of white dust that makes him look like a disgruntled ghost, will take a portion of your grain as his fee. This toll, called the multure, is a source of constant, simmering resentment among the villagers. As you heft your sack of grain, the precious result of your own labor in your own strips, and wait your turn. The miller gives you a curt nod. He is a man of few words and, according to village gossip, even fewer morals. Millers have a reputation for being notoriously dishonest. It was said a miller's thumb was golden because he'd pressed it on the scales to tip them in his favor, or that they had secret spouts to divert a little extra flour into their private stash. Whether or not your miller is a thief is impossible to prove, but the suspicion hangs in the dusty air as thick as the flour itself. You watch him like a hawk as he measures out his portion before grinding the rest. You leave with a sack of flour that is noticeably lighter than the sack of grain you brought in. Your errand of obligation complete. You now turn to an errand of the soul. You walk away from the noisy, worldly mill and towards the quiet center of the village. There stands the parish church, It is the most impressive building you are likely to see on a regular basis. While your home is a creature of wood and mud, the church is built of stone. It is a symbol of permanence, of God's unchanging presence in your fleeting world. You push open the heavy oak door and step inside. The change is immediate. The air is cool and still, a welcome relief from the afternoon sun. It smells of cold stone, damp linen, and the faint, sweet memory of beeswax and incense. A scent of holiness that is a world away from the smells of dirt and livestock. Kink, remember the clean, bright light of the Lord's beeswax candles? Here in the church is the only other place a common person might regularly encounter it, a fragrant reminder of heaven and wealth. The light is dim, filtered through one or two small arched windows. If the parish is prosperous, one of these windows might even have a splash of stained glass, a jewel-like image of a saint that paints a shifting lozenge of colored light on the stone floor. For a moment you just stand there, letting the silence wash over you. Then your eyes are drawn upwards, to the wall above the arch that separates the nave from the chancel. Here, in many village churches, is the congregation's most potent visual aid, the doom painting. It is a vast, vivid, and frankly terrifying mural depicting the Last Judgment. On one side, Christ sits in majesty, welcoming the saved into a serene, orderly heaven. On the other side, chaos. Demons, with grotesque faces and monstrous bodies, drag the damned down into the fiery mouth of hell. The sins of the villagers are depicted in graphic detail. The dishonest merchant, the gossiping woman, the lazy farmer, all receiving their gruesome eternal punishment. It's a powerful, silent sermon, a constant reminder of the stakes. Historians still argue whether the average person's faith was a product of deep, contemplative piety, or simply a raw, visceral fear of the hell so vividly painted on their church wall. You make the sign of the cross, say a quick, mumbled prayer for the souls of your parents, and perhaps an extra one that your cow doesn't go dry. Business with God is done. You step back out into the afternoon, blinking as your eyes readjust to the daylight. Your final stop is the village green. This is the communal heart of the village, a wide, open space of patchy grass where paths cross and people gather. The day's heavy labor is mostly done, and the green is alive with activity. A group of children are playing a chaotic game that involves chasing a dot, pig's bladder, and kicking each other in the shins. An early and much more violent ancestor of football. A few women sit on a bench, spinning with drop spindles, their hands never still, their conversation a low hum of gossip that serves as the village's only news service. A group of young men might be practicing their archery at a target set up at the far end, as all able-bodied men were required by law to do. Their skill with the longbow was England's great military advantage. You stop for a moment, leaning on a fence post, just absorbing the scene. Your neighbor, Walter, wanders over and asks about your strips in the north field. You exchange predictions about the weather. It is here, on the green, that the small, vital threads of community are woven together. Here, you are not just a tenant working the Lord's land, you are a member of a village, a part of a larger whole. It's a brief respite, a moment of shared humanity before you must all retreat back into your individual family units. For the night, the sun is lower now, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. It is time to go home. The sun is a smudge of hazy orange hanging just above the horizon as you walk the familiar path back toward the village. The air is cooling rapidly, and the long, weary shadows of your fellow villagers stretch out beside you. The day of labor in the fields is done, but the day itself is not yet over. There are still tasks to complete, animals to tend to, and a meal to be eaten before the darkness claims the world completely. As you approach the cluster of cottages, the sounds and smells change, the lowing of cattle being led back to their buyers, the frantic bleating of a lost sheep, the barking of dogs. The air, which in the field smelled of earth and open sky, is now thick again with the familiar scent of wood smoke pouring from every thatched roof. It's the smell of home, The smell of supper being prepared. Your first stop is not your own cottage, but the small fenced-in plot of land directly behind it. This is your toft, your private garden. Here you might find the cow, if you're fortunate enough to own one, waiting patiently to be milked. You lead her into the byre, which is often just a sheltered end of your own longhouse, and settle onto a low stool. The milking is a rhythmic, soothing task. The warm milk hisses into the wooden bucket, a sound as comforting as the crackling fire. This milk is liquid gold. Some will be drunk, but most will be carefully processed by your wife into butter or simple cheese, the precious stores of protein and fat to see you through the lean times. Remember that bland pottage from this morning? A lump of fresh butter stirred into it would be a feast. After the cow is settled, you check on the other residents of your small holding. The chickens are coaxed back into their coop for the night, safe from foxes. The pig, if you have one, is given the day's scraps. Pigs were the ultimate medieval recycling unit, capable of turning everything from vegetable peels to acorns into valuable pork. A quirky tidbit from Manor Court records shows that runaway pigs were a constant problem, and owners were frequently fined for the damage their wandering swine did to a neighbor's property or the Lord's crops. Your pig is your family savings account, fattened throughout the year for the great autumn slaughter that will provide salted meat for the winter. With the animals secured, you finally step back inside your home. The fire you kindled in the pre-dawn darkness is now blazing merrily in the central hearth, far off, casting a warm, flickering light throughout the single room. Your wife is tending the ever-present pottage pot, perhaps adding some freshly picked onions or herbs from the garden to liven it up. The smell is thick and savory, a welcome change from the day's toil. The room is hazy with smoke. As always, the single window shutter is closed now against the evening chill, trapping the smoke inside. It swirls in the air, catching the firelight, making your eyes water. You are used to it. It is the price of warmth. Supper is served. You and your family gather on stools or on the edge of the sleeping pallet, holding your wooden bowls. The pottage is hot, and tonight, it's enriched with a small piece of bacon, adding a salty, fatty richness that is pure luxury. You eat it with another piece of that dense, dark bread, using it to mop up every last drop from your bowl. There are no forks. You have a spoon for the pottage and a knife for cutting bread or meat, but most eating is done with your hands. As you eat, you talk. You recount the day's events, the progress of the plowing, a bit of gossip heard from a neighbor, the Reeves' foul mood. Your wife talks about her day, the spinning, the weaving, the churning of butter, the endless tasks that kept the household running. The children, if they are old enough, would have been working alongside you both. There is little concept of a protected childhood here. Children are simply small adults who are expected to contribute as soon as they are able. As children, when the meal is done, the evening's entertainment begins. This is not a time for quiet, solitary pursuits. The light is too poor for much else besides sitting near the fire. So now, you might use this time for small, manual tasks that don't require sharp eyesight. You could be mending a tool handle, sharpening your knife on a whetstone, or helping to card wool, combing it between two bristly paddles to prepare it for spinning. This is also the time for stories. An older member of the family might recount a local legend, a saint's life, or a garbled version of a heroic romance that has trickled down from the world of the nobility. Jokes are told, songs are sung. It is a time for reinforcing the bonds of family and community, a small bubble of light and sound against the vast, silent darkness outside. The fire begins to die down. The logs collapse into a glowing bed of embers. The warmth in the room lessens, and the ever-present chill begins to creep back in from the walls. Warmth. It is a signal that the day is well and truly over. The last task is to prepare for the night. You check that the door is securely barred. The night holds dangers, both real and imagined. While you might not fear the kinds of monsters we see in movies, the fear of a stray wolf, a desperate thief, or just the profound, disorienting power of the dark is very real. Then comes the final ritual, Banking the fire, you carefully cover the glowing embers with ash, preserving that precious spark for the morning. The room is plunged into a familiar deep darkness, 5-4, relieved only by the faintest red glow from the heart of the hearth. You and your family make your way to the straw pallet, huddling together for warmth under the heavy wool blankets. You lie there in the dark, listening to the sounds of the night. The wind whistling through the thatch, the rustle of a mouse, the distant hoot of an owl. Your body aches from the day's labor. Your mind is filled with the simple calculus of survival, the state of the crops, the health of the animals, the amount of grain left in the store. It is a hard life, a life of constant work, dictated by the sun and the seasons, but it is your life. And as you drift off to sleep, you know that tomorrow, with the first light, it will all begin again. The life of a medieval scribe, you wake not to a sound but to its absence. To it, and the deep, profound silence of the dormitory is broken only by the tolling of a single, distant bell. Its clear, metallic note cuts through the cold air, a summons that requires no snooze button. This is matins, the pre-dawn prayer, and your day has begun. The cold is your first and most constant companion. It radiates from the thick stone walls of the monastery, seeps up from the flagstone floor, settles deep in your bones. It's a sacred kind of cold, the kind that is meant to remind you that the comforts of the flesh are fleeting. Or at least that's what the abbot says. You suspect God might just have a personal grudge against your toes. You rise from your simple straw-filled mattress, the coarse wool of your monk's habit, scratching against your skin. In the cavernous, dark room, you can make out the shadowy forms of your brothers doing the same, moving with a practiced quietness that is part of your shared life. For there is no chatter, no morning pleasantries. Most of your waking hours are bound by a vow of silence, a rule designed to keep the mind focused on God. In practice, it also makes borrowing a tool from Brother Thomas an elaborate game of divine charades. After prayers in the chapel, a long service of psalms and chants in the flickering candlelight, and a meager breakfast of dark bread and weak ale, you make your way to the place where you will spend the daylight hours. Your workshop, your sanctuary, the scriptorium. Historians still argue whether the scriptorium was typically a large, open, communal room filled with desks, or a series of small, individual wooden cubicles called carrels set into the sunniest wall of the cloister walk. It likely varied from place to place. Yours is a carrel, a small, three-sided stall of dark oak that offers a measure of privacy and protection from drafts. It faces a large, unglazed window, covered by a screen of oiled linen that allows a diffuse, milky light to pass through while keeping out the worst of the wind. This light is your most precious resource, more valuable than gold. Your work depends entirely upon it. You settle onto your hard wooden stool before your writing desk. It is not a flat table, but a lectern. Its surface angled steeply towards you. Everything you need is stored neatly in the recesses of your carrel. Evan Pors, the day's real work cannot begin until you have prepared your tools. This is a ritual, a quiet meditation to focus the mind before the first word is written. First, your knife. It is not a weapon, but a craftsman's tool. It has a short, stout blade and a simple wooden handle. And it is perhaps your most versatile possession. This is a penknife, in its truest, original sense. Its primary purpose is to shape and sharpen your quill. You will also use its polished, rounded back to smooth the surface of the parchment, and its sharp point to meticulously scrape away any errors you might make. It is an eraser, a pencil sharpener, and a page smoother, all in one. You run your thumb over the cool steel, checking its edge. Next, and most importantly, is the quill itself. You have a small bundle of them, the primary flight feathers from a goose or a swan, harvested in the spring. Finding the perfect goose feather is a quest in itself, one that makes you look at passing flocks with a disturbingly critical, professional eye. The best ones come from the outer left wing, as their curve fits most comfortably into a right-handed scribe's grip. A quirky but essential part of the process is that the raw feather is too soft. It must be hardened, a process sometimes called dutching, by burying it in a tray of hot sand for a few moments. This tempers the barrel, making it more durable. You select a promising-looking feather. Its barrel is smooth and semi-translucent. With your penknife, you begin to shape it. You slice off the feathery barbs from the lower part of the shaft. Then, with great care, you make a diagonal cut at the tip, hollowing out the point slightly. You slice a tiny vertical slit up the center of this point. This is the crucial ink minus channel that will allow the ink to flow smoothly to the page. Finally, you trim the very tip to the desired width, a fine point for minuscule script or a broader one for more formal lettering. Each scribe has his own preferences, his own unique way of cutting a nib. Your quill is an extension of your own hand, and you shape it with the intimacy of a musician tuning his instrument. With your quill prepared, you lay out the rest of your tools. There is the inkhorn, a hollowed-out cow's horn, stoppered with a wooden plug, which holds your black ink. It sits in a special hole cut into your desk to prevent it from tipping over. A spill would be a catastrophe of biblical proportions. Beside it, you have a collection of smaller shells or ceramic pots for your colored inks and pigments, which you will prepare later. There is your plummet, a small piece of lead, which you will use with a ruler to draw faint, silvery guidelines on the page. There is your awl, a sharp-pointed tool used to prick tiny, evenly spaced holes down the margins of the page, which guide the ruling of your lines. There is a chunk of pumice stone for polishing the surface of the parchment to a glassy smoothness, and a piece of soft cloth for wiping away any excess ink. You arrange them all in their proper places. Your knife, your quill, your inkhorn, your ruler, your awl, they are a quiet, humble assembly, the instruments of a sacred art. Outside, the sun has fully risen, and the scriptorium is filled with the cool, clear light of morning. The page before you is blank. Your tools are ready. The silence is no longer an absence, but an anticipation. The time for preparation is over. The time for writing is about to begin. The page before you is not paper. Paper, a fragile and novel material from the East, is still viewed with some suspicion. Too flimsy, too ephemeral for the Word of God. What lies on your desk is something far more substantial. Something with a life story of its own. It is a sheet of vellum. You run the back of your hand over its surface. It is cool, smooth, and yet subtly textured, with a creamy, pale opacity. It has a faint, clean smell, a little like leather and chalk. Single leaf, a page in the magnificent psalter you are creating, was once the skin of a calf. To produce a full Bible might require the skins of over 500 animals, an entire herd transformed into a single book. You did not make this vellum yourself. That is the work of the perkaminarius, the parchment maker, a specialized and notoriously smelly trade, often relegated to the edge of town for good reason. The process is laborious. The animal skin is first soaked in a lime-water solution for several days. This caustic bath loosens the hair and dissolves the fat. Then, the skin is draped over a beam, and the parchment maker scrapes away the hair on one side and the remaining flesh on the other with a dull, curved blade. The truly transformative part comes next. The wet, de-haired hide is stretched taut, as tight as a drumhead, onto a large wooden frame called a hearse. As it dries under this immense tension, the very structure of the skin changes. The collagen fibers align into thin, layered sheets, creating a durable, smooth, and stable writing surface. The parchment maker returns to it again and again as it dries, scraping it with a special crescent-shaped knife, a lunulum, to achieve the perfect, uniform thinness. Finally, it is polished with powdered pumice and chalk to make it receptive to ink. This painstaking process is written into the very fabric of the page before you. You can tell which side of the vellum was the hair side and which was the flesh side. The flesh side, the inner side of the skin, is whiter and smoother. The hair side has a slightly yellower tint and a velvety texture. If you look closely, you can sometimes still see the faint pattern of the hair follicles. A truly professional scribe ensures that when his book is bound, a hair side always faces another hair side, and meaty scribe, and a flesh side faces a flesh side. This creates a pleasing visual uniformity when the book is open, a subtle detail that only a fellow craftsman would ever notice or appreciate. It's the medieval equivalent of making sure all your desktop icons are perfectly aligned. But before you can grace this pristine surface with a single letter, you must prepare your ink. You will not be using a simple soot-based carbon ink. That is for amateurs. You will be making the king of all medieval inks, the one used for nearly all formal manuscripts, iron gall ink. Your ingredients are laid out. First, the oak galls. They look like small, woody, lightweight spheres, almost like round tree nuts. They are not a fruit, but a deformity, an abnormal growth that an oak tree produces in response to the eggs laid by a particular type of wasp. These galls are rich in tannic and gallic acid. You take a handful of them and place them in a small stone mortar. With a pestle, you begin to crush them. The work is rhythmic, a soft, percussive thump, thump, thump in the quiet of the scriptorium. You grind them down until they are a fine, brownish powder. Next, you pour this powder into a ceramic pot and add your liquid. Some scribes use rainwater, but you prefer wine. The alcohol acts as a mild preservative. You pour in the red wine, and the powder immediately darkens, the tannins beginning to leach out into the liquid. You let this mixture steep, a sort of bitter, undrinkable tea. Now for the magic ingredient, vitriol. This is iron iodide sulfate, a mineral salt. It comes in the form of pale green crystalline chunks. You take a small piece and grind it separately into a fine powder. With great care, you add the powdered vitriol to your tannin solution. The chemical reaction is slow but beautiful. As the iron sulfate dissolves, it reacts with the tannic acid. The liquid, which was a reddish brown, begins to transform. It darkens, turning a murky gray, and will eventually deepen into a rich, velvety blue-black. This ink is a living thing. When you first write with it, it will appear grayish on the page, but as it is exposed to the air, it will oxidize and darken to a deep, permanent black that bites into the surface of the vellum itself. Unlike carbon ink that sits on the surface, iron gall ink becomes part of the page. It is incredibly durable, which is why we can still read these manuscripts today, while your modern gel pen might just decide to give up mid-sentence for no reason at all. Finally, you add a binder, a small translucent lump of gum arabic, the hardened sap of the acacia tree. You dissolve it in the ink. This will give the mixture a slightly thicker consistency, helping it flow more smoothly from the quill and binding the pigment securely to the vellum once it dries. Scribes and scholars still debate the exact recipes and secret additives that were used. Some added a pinch of sugar or honey to give the ink a glossy sheen. Others added soot to make it darker from the start. Your recipe is the one your master taught you, and his master taught him. It is a tradition held in your hands. You give the mixture a final stir with a small wooden stick. It is ready. You carefully pour the fresh ink into your inkhorn, filling it for the day's work. You wipe your hands, your tools, and the edge of the pot. A single misplaced drop could ruin a week's work. The page is ready. The ink is ready. Your quill is sharp. But you still do not write. You pick up your ruler and your plummet, the small lead stylus. With a light, steady hand, you begin the final stage of preparation, ruling the page. You prick tiny, invisible holes down the margins with your awl, and now you connect them, drawing faint, silvery gray lines across the vellum, a perfect, invisible scaffold upon which your words will be built. This is a task of supreme patience, for the word of God must not be crooked. The scaffolding is complete. Your faint, silvery guidelines stretch across the creamy vellum, a perfect, near-invisible grid promising order and uniformity. The sun has climbed higher, and the cool, indirect light filtering through the oiled linen screen of your window is at its peak. This is the golden hour for a scribe. Scribe, the time of day when your eyes are sharpest and the light is most true. The silence in the scriptorium deepens. It is no longer an empty silence, but a full one, charged with immense concentration. You can hear the distant, muffled chant from the chapel, the scratch of your neighbor's quill in the next carol, the soft sigh of the wind in the cloister garden. These sounds are the gentle current in which your work is suspended. You take a moment to read the exemplar. the master copy of the text you are transcribing. It is propped up on a small stand next to your desk. Today, you are working on the Book of Psalms, specifically Psalm Arsursen. You read the familiar Latin words, Dominus regit me et nihil mihi dierit. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Your job is not to interpret, not to edit, and certainly not to have an original thought. Your job is to be a perfect conduit, to transfer these sacred words from that page to this one without error, mission without ego. You dip the tip of your freshly cut quill into the inkhorn. You don't plunge it in, that would overload it. You just touch the surface of the dark liquid, letting the tiny reservoir in the nib fill by capillary action. You wipe the excess ink from the side of the nib on a scrap piece of parchment. Then, you begin. You press the quill to the vellum. The first stroke is a prayer in itself. The ink, still a pale gray, flows from the nib, leaving a sharp, clean line. Your hand moves with a slow, deliberate grace, a motion honed by years of practice. You are not writing in a cursive scrawl. You are drawing. Each letter is constructed from a precise sequence of individual strokes, or minims. A downstroke, a hairline, upstroke, a short connecting curve. Your arm, from the shoulder to the wrist, is held steady. The fine movements come from your fingers. A delicate, controlled dance. The script you are using is a formal Gothic bookhand, or textura. It is characterized by its tall, narrow, angular letters, packed closely together. The effect on the page is dense and dark, creating a uniform texture that gives the script its name. It is beautiful, dignified, and exceptionally difficult to read if you're not used to it. The letters I, U, M, and N can become an almost indistinguishable forest of vertical strokes. A mainstream historical fact is that scribes in this period began adding a small dot, or tittle, above the letter I specifically to help distinguish it in a sea of minims, a tiny innovation that has saved countless readers from headaches ever since. The only sound you make is the faint, rhythmic scratch of the quill on the vellum. It's a dry, crisp sound like autumn leaves skittering across stone. Scratch, lift. Scratch, lift. The ink flows smoothly. The letters form, one after another, marching in disciplined ranks along the faint guidelines you drew. You work slowly, your focus absolute. A moment's distraction, a sudden sneeze, could lead to a disastrous blot or a misspelled word. Hours pass. You become lost in the rhythm of the work. The world outside your small wooden carrel fades away. There is only the exemplar, the page, the quill, and the slow, steady transformation of a blank surface into a sacred text. Your back begins to ache from hunching over the slanted desk. Your eyes begin to strain from the intense focus. Your fingers cramp around the barrel of the quill. This is the physical reality of the scribe's art. It is not gentle, contemplative work. It is an endurance sport. After completing a block of text, you reach a pre-planned space. Here, the text calls for a large, decorated initial, an illumination. This is where your work shifts from writing to painting. You put down your quill and pick up a different set of tools. You have a collection of fine brushes, some so small they are made from only a few bristles of squirrel fur. You have your palette, a large seashell where you will mix your colors. First, you prepare the base for the gold leaf. You mix up a thick, sticky paste of gesso, a combination of plaster, chalk, and a binder like animal hide glue. With a fine brush, you carefully write the letter, a large ornate D for Dominus, in this thick gesso, building it up so it is raised from the surface of the page. You must let this dry completely. Once the gesso is hard, the true magic begins. You take out your book of gold leaf. These are sheets of pure gold that have been beaten to an impossible thinness, so light they will flutter away with the slightest breath. You gently breathe on the raised gesso letter. The moisture in your breath makes the surface slightly tacky. Then, with a special tool called a gilder's tip, you lift a shimmering sheet of gold leaf and lay it carefully over the gesso. With a soft brush or a polished stone called a burnisher, you gently press the gold down. It adheres to the sticky gesso. You brush away the excess, and what remains is a perfect, gleaming, three-dimensional letter of pure gold. It catches the light, shining with a divine radiance. Now, for the color. You have your pigments carefully sourced and stored. There is vermilion, a brilliant red made from the toxic mineral cinnabar. There is ultramarine, a deep, celestial blue ground from the semi-precious stone lapis lazuli, immense cost from Afghanistan. A quirky fact is that some less scrupulous monastic workshops might try to pass off a cheaper blue made from azurite as true ultramarine. To a discerning patron, or god for that matter, this was a serious deception. You mix the powdered pigments with a binder, usually egg white glare pre or egg yolk tempera, to create a simple, fast-drying paint. With your finest brush, you begin to paint intricate patterns of vines and leaves around the golden initial, filling the space with vibrant color. A touch of red here, a line of blue there. It is slow, meticulous work, painting on a miniature scale. Your finished page will be a symphony of black, gold, and jewel-like colors, a feast for the eyes, and a worthy vessel for the holy words it contains. The light is beginning to fail. The cool, clear glow of midday has softened into the warm, slanted light of late afternoon. Shadows are lengthening in the cloister garden outside your window, and the milky screen over the opening seems to be growing dimmer. Your most precious resource, the natural light you rely on, is draining away. Working by candlelight is strictly forbidden in the scriptorium. Remember how medieval people lit their homes with smoky, sputtering, and dangerously flammable tallow candles? The risk of an open flame around such priceless and labor-intensive books, not to mention the vellum, which is essentially a sheet of highly flammable dried animal protein, was far too great. The abbot would sooner let you juggle priceless relics than bring a lit candle in here. This rule means your workday is defined absolutely by the sun. When the light goes, your work stops. You look down at the page you have been working on all day. A block of dense, black script stands in perfect formation. A magnificent golden letter D gleams with its own internal fire, surrounded by a delicate tracery of red and blue vines. It is a good day's work. Perhaps you have completed half a page, or if the script is particularly dense, only a third. The creation of a single book is not a project of days or weeks, but of months, sometimes years. It is a testament to the slow, patient accumulation of focused effort. Your body aches. Your shoulders are a knot of tension. Your eyes feel sandy and sore from the strain. The fingers of your right hand are stiff, permanently cramped into the shape of a quill holder. The life of a scribe is a sedentary one, and it comes with a host of physical ailments, what we might now call repetitive strain injuries. Now begins the final ritual of the day, cleaning your tools. These instruments are your livelihood, the extension of your craft, and you treat them with reverence. You take your quill and carefully wipe the nib clean of any remaining ink. You might give it a quick, gentle scrape with your knife to ensure the channel is clear. You place it carefully in its holder, ready for tomorrow. The most important task is to clean your inkhorn. You cannot leave the iron gall ink sitting in it overnight. The sediment would settle and harden, and the ink's chemical properties might change. You pour the leftover ink back into its main storage pot. Then you rinse the horn thoroughly with water, wiping it out with a small piece of linen until it is completely clean and dry. You do the same with the seashell you used as a palette, scrubbing away the last vibrant traces of vermilion and ultramarine. The pigments are too precious to waste, and you would never allow them to dry and contaminate each other. You gather the sheets of vellum, both the completed pages and the blank ones, and place them carefully between two wooden boards, which you then press and tie shut. This keeps the vellum flat and protects it from humidity, which could cause it to buckle and warp overnight. You put away your ruler, your awl, your burnisher. Your small, tidy workspace is returned to a state of readiness. A blank slate for the morning. As you pack away your things, you might reflect on your work. For most scribes, this was not a creative act, but a devotional one. You are not an author, you are a vessel. Your piety, your focus, your very hand are instruments in the service of God. However, That doesn't mean you didn't have personal feelings about the work. Hidden away in the margins of many medieval manuscripts, scribes left behind little personal notes, complaints, and doodles for future eyes to find. These marginalia are a wonderful, humanizing window into the scribe's world. One famous inscription reads, "Writing is excessive drudgery. It crooks your back, it dims your sight, it twists your stomach and your sides." Another complains, "Oh, my hand." And a particularly relatable one simply states, "Thank God, it will soon be dark." These were not meant for their patrons or abbots to see, but were small private acts of rebellion or simple human expression. Historians still debate the full purpose of the more elaborate marginalia. The famous drawings of knights fighting snails, of monkeys playing bagpipes, of grotesque hybrids, were they simple doodles born of boredom, allegorical commentaries on the text? Or just a form of medieval memeing, perhaps? In a tiny corner of the page where it will be trimmed off by the bookbinder, you use your stylus to leave a nearly invisible note of your own. Frigus est. It is cold. A simple human complaint, a message in a bottle sent across the centuries. The bell tolls again, this time for Vespers, the evening prayer. You rise from your stool, stretching your aching back. You join the silent procession of your brothers as you leave the scriptorium, abandoning it to the gathering shadows. The day of labor is done. Ahead lies more prayer, a simple supper, and then to bed in the cold dormitory, to rest and prepare to do it all again tomorrow. You look back one last time at your small carol. In the fading light, you can just make out the gleam of the gold leaf on the page you created. It is a tiny star in the growing darkness, a small point of light against the night. It is a piece of your life, your skill, your devotion, made tangible and permanent. And tomorrow, if God and your eyesight permit, you will add another